Okay, folks, well, welcome back to our next video in the sort of buttonhole masterclass series. In this video, we're going to cover 4 different types of faux buttonholes, or you may hear them sometimes referred to as non-functional buttonholes or closed work buttonholes. We're going to do 4 different ones, although you may see in front of you right now we only have 3 lines drawn out. There's a reason for that. We'll get to it when we get to it. So the first one I'm going to demonstrate to you would be the most sort of common one, really the only one that we see in Anglo-American work. So British stuff, American stuff, things like that. The other 3 are ones that we see more on continental things, be that France or Sweden or the German states or Switzerland, that sort of thing. So some other faux buttonholes that we see on examples of clothing from those areas. And we really don't ever see them in British or American stuff. And let's be honest, saying British and American is kind of saying the same thing, because at the time they're really sort of one homogenous people for argument's sake anyways. And yes, I know you're saying right now that, well, the revolution kind of says otherwise, but that's politics. That is not fashion. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. We're going to start with the one on the left. And again, this will be the sort of Anglo-American one. I'm going to zoom you guys in here so you guys can see the work a little bit better. And just as usual, I'm going to remind you that I have the camera kind of set up between me and the work. So I'm working kind of in an awkward position here. Sort of not the ideal situation for me, trying to make the ideal situation for you. Okay, so we're working in a piece of Coach & Phillips broadcloth here. I think. Yeah. And that means we're going to be going back to working with the silk buttonhole twist. So all the preparatory work that goes into preparing the thread that we talked about in the first video will apply here. I'm not going to demonstrate it again because we've already covered it. If you haven't seen that, because this is a video that was of interest to you, at least go back to the beginning of the first video in the series, and it will demonstrate how to prepare the silk twist. So just like we demonstrated before, we're going to bury the needle into the work, and we're going to come out to the side of where we want to be, and we're going to pull it through, and we're going to leave a little tail, and then we're going to run the gimp all the way down. Now for these, I just use a single strand of gimp and anchor it down at the other end like so. Now I don't have any interfacing or lining on the back of this, because this buttonhole stitch is really only worked on the top edge of the fabric that you're working on. That being said, make sure that you have whatever interfacing and lining would be applicable to your garment in whenever you're making these things. But for the buttonhole stitch itself, it doesn't require anything. All right, so for getting started, it's the same thing, right? Bury the needle in, and come out just to the outside. Okay, and pull the thread through. Same thing, leaving a little tail. And now we're going to get started doing the buttonhole stitch. And this part is no different than an open work buttonhole, other than we're only taking the stitch through the sort of top little bit of the thread here. Okay, and that's it. And we don't really need to catch a lot of the fabric. Just enough to seat the pearl, which of course, because I was talking, I forgot to make. So there we go. And just like before, we're going to treat the center of our chalk line here, right, as the opening of our buttonhole. So our needle is just going to come to the center of the chalk line. It's going to come just to the outside of the gimp, sort of in the usual fashion. And we're going to make the buttonhole in in the normal fashion. And we're going to seat the GIMP like normal. And we're going to hope that at some point in time the camera actually focuses, but for whatever reason it has a little bit of trouble here with this stuff. But this is all we're doing, folks. We're kind of just going down the line, just catching a little bit of that top fabric. We're not catching a lot of it with the needle. Just like in the first video, we're working with a size F silk twist, okay? Again, I like to use that for sort of working class and listed class stuff. It's not something I would use for officer grade stuff. And we talked about that in the first video. So we're just going to work our way down. You may notice that as I'm working on this, especially with faux buttonholes and any buttonholes I want to look nice, I'll set the work down and I'll pull the GIMP over and then I'll seat the pearl at like a 45-degree angle, like so, okay? And that's how I just like to keep things kind of good to go. It would usually be the case that when making these, you would make them with the thread that matches the color of whatever you're working on. And if you can't find a match that's perfect, going a shade darker usually looks nicer than going a shade lighter. I don't know if you can really see when the needle's being taken up here, but I'm really not catching a lot of this fabric. And the Cochin and Phillips fabric makes this real easy because, you know, it's made well. So it makes it real easy to just catch, you know, just a little bit of it. And we just keep seating that pearl at like a 45-degree angle. We don't need this buttonhole stitch to be ridiculously close to itself. You need room for these pearls to exist. Just remember that, like, the knot that you're making here, let's see if I can get it to focus. The knot that you're making is sort of bigger than the thread, right? Whenever you're done making it, so just keep that in mind. So we're just going to work all the way down to the end, and then we'll end up making a bar tack sort of in the usual manner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut you guys out now, and when we return, I will have the row done, and we'll talk about the return run. So I will see you all shortly. Okay, so we've got the one notch done, or the one side done here, rather. And we're going to go ahead and do the bar tack sort of in the usual way. We're going to take the thread up and out, and then we're going to take probably about 3 loops here, like so. We're going to run the GIMP back down the other side. Anchor it off. bar tack gets done like it's been done in every other video, where we are only sewing the buttonhole stitch through the bar tack threads themselves. Okay. Now, to go back down the other side, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, because this thing seems to focus a little bit better that way. So to go back down the other side, first thing I do is I actually push all these stitches up. Push them all up so they're all kind of up and out of the way. Just use my fingernail for it. I don't know if you can actually see that or not. But they actually just get all pushed up and out of the way. Can we see how they're all sort of standing up, proud like? And that's going to help us on our sort of return run here, okay? So to get back in, we do the same thing like we did with an open work buttonhole. We're just going to take one sort of loop to get back in. And now on the way back, I put my needle in just next to the feet of the other buttonholes on the inside, okay? And take the stitch, pull the gimp out of the way, and seat it at 45 degrees. So the idea here, so you understand what we're doing, is we're going to set all these purls at 45 degrees towards the center of the buttonhole. And we push the other ones out of the way so that we have some room to work. And then when we get to the end of this, we will press everything back towards the center. So this will be the first video where you get introduced to buttonhole pressing. And we want this to look nice and tight and closed when it's all said and done. Now, we're not going to talk about the notch board in this video. If you don't know what that is, it's like a wooden mold that you put a buttonhole in and press into. We will talk about that when we get into higher quality buttonholes. I don't know whether or not notch boards were used on lower end things. I don't know of any reason why they wouldn't be. I mean, it's not like it's a, you know, some strange obscure tool. But I would imagine most of you don't have one. So I'm going to show you how to press a buttonhole without one. And then, I guess I'm also kind of assuming that most of you are probably making sort of enlisted class, working class stuff. So you can see what you need and what you don't need to make certain results. Now, I will say that this setup for me is very odd. I do buttonholes in a very particular way. I find buttonholes to be one of those things where you kind of need to find a zen, and you kind of need to get a routine, and you kind of just need to stick to it once it's all worked out for you. I tend to work buttonholes fairly close to my face. I'm usually seated. My table's quite high. I have a higher chair that sits next to it. So my setup right now, where I'm standing and the work is considerably further away from me than it otherwise would be, is really making me uncomfortable because this isn't how I trained myself to do these things. Buttonholes are definitely one of those things where, you know, practice makes permanent, and whatever it is you practiced, that's really the only way you're comfortable working with these things. We're going to do our best. considering that these don't need to be all that perfect anyways. And when we get to the sort of officer grades buttonholes, where we do need things to be a bit more perfect, we will rethink the camera setup here so that I can actually be in the situation that I like to be in to make buttonholes, so that I will hopefully be able to film for you the way that this should really go. But for this, I suppose it's good enough. Now, sometimes a faux buttonhole is a sort of standalone thing, right? If you consider if you have a jacket, or rather I should say a coat, that has the center box pleat in the back of it, the seam work there is usually hidden up with a faux buttonhole, and then we'll have a few more extras for decoration. But oftentimes a faux buttonhole has a button sort of attached to it at one point on one end of it, right? The button doesn't do anything, and the buttonhole is just there to make the button look like it might do something. Matter of fact, I would say that's probably the majority of faux buttonholes look something like that. So I'm going to finish this off not with a bar tack. Well, it will be a bar tack, but it won't be the sort of decorative bar tack that you might used to be seeing. Because if you're putting a button, let's say on this side, doesn't really make sense to do the extra work to make that, does it? Doesn't need to be reinforced, and it doesn't need to look nice because it's going to be under a button. So you'll see what I mean here when we get to the end. So here we go. This is the last stitch being taken. Okay. And then, just like before, we're going to bring our needle to the outside without doing a stitch, and we're just going to take a couple loops just to kind of hold everything together. Just like so. And then we're going to bury our needle into the fabric and bring it out. Then we're going to do the same thing with our gimp thread here. So again, what we're simulating here is that we will be putting a button or something on this side. So none of this bit will be seen. So we don't need to do the usual finishing. So there's our buttonhole. Now, what you want to start doing here with your fingers is start pushing that side that we kind of pushed out. Push it back towards the middle, and then kind of push both sides to the middle. Now, pressing a buttonhole. So how do we do that? I'm going to zoom you back out here so you can kind of see all what's going on. So we're going to take our iron, and we are going to try to find a relatively flat space on it, and we're just going to kind of push it to the outside. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to kind of just push it, okay? You can use your finger to stabilize it, but can you see how it's sort of becoming straighter and it's kind of standing up? That's what we want. if you have a home iron where you can really control the temperature, you know, you don't need a lot of heat for this. This is silk. So once we got it all sort of pressed up and closed up, if you can see that. What we're then going to do is just let some of the hot steam fly over top of it. What that's going to do is melt the wax that's in there, and you can do some sort of finishing work with your fingers if you like. And there we go. It's not the prettiest. I'm not really happy with it, but it's done. You can see it sits kind of prominently up off the fabric. But there we are. One faux buttonhole. And again, on this end, we would be simulating the idea that like a button is going to be placed there, so you wouldn't see that bottom of the stuff anyways. So that's the first buttonhole. So I'm going to get set up to do the next one, and we'll dive into it. So I will see you on the return. All right, so we're off to the next one. So for this buttonhole, we're going to start off with a double strand of GIMP, and we're going to run it right down the center of the buttonhole. Okay, just like so, and buried in. Just like so. Okay, so double strand for this one. Now this one isn't terribly different from the other one. We're going to go ahead and start off by, burying our needle in and coming out to the outside of this thing. And we're going to go ahead and do a buttonhole stitch just all the way down on the GIMP here. Okay. And basically, we're kind of just couching the GIMP in place. You can leave a little bit of distance between these stitches, and you'll see why here in a moment on the return. Well, we got ourselves a little bit of a disaster on our hands. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the camera, work this knot out, and we'll come back. All right, and we're back. Thread knot nut, man, that's a real thing you got to deal with in buttonhole world. So anyway, what we're going to do here is we're going to continue to just run straight down this line, couching this GIMP until we get to the end, okay? And then when we get to the end, we're going to make ourselves a little bar tack, and then we're going to come back. So what I'm going to do is cut the camera here, and when we get to the end, you can see what happens, okay? So to be continued. All right, and we're back. You may have noticed the sample piece changed, and that's because I already went ahead and finished this, and because I'm an idiot, I forgot to press the record button. So we made a second sample piece. But anyway, you can see here, we've done the rundown. We've left some space between all of our stitching. right? And we've couched that piece of gimp. So now we're going to go turn around. So there is no real bar tack on this. We just kind of change direction. So when we get down here, what we're going to do is we're going to put our needle in, and we're going to sew between, you can see that, between the other buttonhole stitches, and only catch the gimp, okay? And then we're going to do a buttonhole stitch that way. And we're going to do that all the way on the back down the return, okay? We're going to take a stitch between the other buttonhole stitches, and we're going to do our best to only catch the gimp and not catch that other buttonhole stitch. That's our goal, all the way down the run here. And once you kind of get a hang for it, it's actually pretty quick. Which, for the remainder of these faux buttonholes I'm going to show you, that's going to be the theme, is that they're pretty quick. Which, if you try any of these, might make you want to quit doing Anglo-American stuff and start doing more continental stuff, because they are, for sure, more into cheating. Which makes things easier to make. Couldn't tell you why that is. I mean, I could tell you why they were more into cheating, but what I couldn't tell you why is, you know, why do all of these things I'm showing you now not really show up, you know, in English tailoring? They pretty much just always use the buttonhole stitch proper. Real buttonholes, fake buttonholes. They almost always do it. They just they're just not into cheating in the same way. I don't know if it's a point of pride or just, or what it was. Couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you. And we're just about down at the end. And you can see this made a really nice buttonhole. Without a whole lot of effort. So when I get to the bottom, I kind of do the stitch over top of everything, just to lock everything in place. And then, we bury our needle and leave, just like we did before. Pull the tails and trim them off. And then what we're left with is this, which doesn't really need a pressing, to be honest with you. But we're going to do one anyway, just to see what happens, right? Because why not? So we'll go ahead and kind of bump it all to the middle. Hit it with some steam, lock everything in place, and there we go. I mean, that's pretty nice looking thing, isn't it? So that's our 2 buttonholes done. You can see them side by side. So now we'll get set up to do the next one here. Now this next one I'm going to demonstrate to you. Henry Cook actually has a sailor's coat that has this buttonhole stitch on it, which he believes is French. And there are some Swiss uniforms running around that have this buttonhole stitch on them as well. So we'll go ahead and set up for this one and return once we are ready. So I will see you shortly. All right, here we go, the next one. Like I said, this is one that Henry Cook actually has a coat that has it on it. And there's a few Swiss coats out there that have that. And Henry Cook thinks that his coat is French, so potentially French and Swiss use, possibly more. So this one's rather interesting. So the first thing that we need to do, like always, is, couch our needle and have it come out just to the side of where we want to work. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a series of loops all the way down. So we're going to push our needle in and out like that, just opposite of where the thread came out, and it's going to make a loop, you see. And we're going to do the same thing going down this way, going down this way. We're going to do this the whole run. We're going to make these little loops. You want to try to get the spacing even. You'll have a much better result if you get the spacing even. You want each one of these loops to be, I don't know, like an eighth of an inch apart or so. The size of the thread you're using will kind of get a vote in that. How tight you want the finished product to be, get a vote in that as well. Other than me just making a workman's garment for myself, I've never really gotten to do this on anybody's clothing I've made, because it's just not, I just don't end up making stuff for people where this would be appropriate. So I did it for myself once just to do it. So I haven't done this a lot, I'll admit that. Okay, so when we get down to the end of the run here, okay, we're going to put our needle in to finish the loop, but then we want to come out in the middle of the loop. You see where the needle is? We want to be in the middle of that loop, like so. Okay, so now we're going to start making the faux stitch. So what we're going to do, the rest of this, by the way, is only working on the loops. We're not trying to catch any of the fabric, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our needle off to the left side of the loop, and we're going to put our needle from underneath and go up. And we want what we're pulling here to go off to the left side. Then we're going to bring our thread down to the left side, and our needle from the top and go down on the right side, like so, okay? And then we're going to pull this downward, and it's going to make this little knot. And then we're going to take our needle from the bottom and go up, and we want to be on the left side of the loop. And this thing that we're pulling, we want to seat off to the left. And then we're going to take our excess and bring it down to the left side. We're going to take our needle, come into the loop from the top going downwards, and we're going to pull the little knot. Okay? And we are just going to keep repeating this over and over and over again until we get to the bottom. So come up through the loop, off to the left side, come from the top going downwards, on the opposite side, pull the loop. And you can see what's happening here. So now you can probably understand why trying to get these loops evenly spaced apart matters, because it'll make a better result in the end, so on and so forth. So I'll probably speed the video up at this point. You've probably seen it enough times now to see what we're doing. And then when we get to the bottom, we'll finish it off. All right, now that we're down at the bottom, we're going to make the shape one last time. And then when we're done, we basically just sink our needle in. And that's it. That's the end of that stitch. Now, I'll freely admit right now that I'm not happy with that. But you get an idea of what this stitch is. But I'm not happy with that. You can see how uneven it is, and frankly, it's too far apart. When I did this on the thing I made for myself, I had to practice it a few times to get the distancing of those loops that we made in the beginning down. Because they're everything. You can see how uneven that looks there and how uneven it looks there. But that's the technique. So you can go ahead and play with it. You can see sort of up here at the beginning how it looks rather nice. A bunch of chains sort of attached to each other. But as they get too spaced apart, it really looks sloppy. So, gives you something to play with anyway. And probably a good thing that we did it kind of crappy, because you can see what it looks like when it's done crappy. but also hopefully you were able to see, you know, just how to make this stitch. The ones on Henry's coat are pretty tight. They're pretty close together. The ones on the Swiss coat are a little bit more open, sort of like what we see up here, not like this. This is just trash, but kind of what you see up on this end. And the ones in Henry's coat are even tighter. So making those loops is really the big skill with this. Good. Hit it with the steam anyways and melt the stuff in. All right, so that's that faux buttonhole stitch anyways. And now we'll go ahead and we'll set up to do the last one. So I'll see you all in one moment. All right, so here we go. The last faux buttonhole stitch. Now this one's kind of hilarious because it's nothing more than raising some of this fabric here so that we have the appearance of a buttonhole. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take our fabric and we're going to fold it in half, and we're kind of just going to do some stabbing work sort of back and forth here like so. Now if you were doing this on something for real, as always, you should be using thread that matches whatever fabric you're working on. I've seen this on some European military coats. I don't know if this was ever done in the civilian context or not. But basically, we're just going to do some stabbing stitches along here. You would, of course, hide the knot on the inside of the fabric. I figured you're all smart enough to understand that, so I don't need to explain that. But yeah, the knots will get hidden on the inside, but for the sake of speeding things up, we're just going to keep them on the outside. But that's it. We do a stabbing stitch, right? And then when we open the fabric up, you just have this lump, right, in the fabric. And we'll go ahead and give this a little bit of a press here. But that's it. That's all she wrote with that one. You just make this lump of fabric like that, and you know, this would have like a button or something at the bottom of it, and I suppose, you know, from an acceptable military distance, that would roughly have the appearance of you know, a buttonhole. I do think that this one's rather funny myself, but there you go. That's it. I think it was a Swiss coat as well that I saw that on. But there you go. There's our four faux buttonholes. The sort of normal buttonhole stitch worked in two directions and pressed that you would see on Anglo-American stuff. This one, it's sort of a continental stitch. This one's definitely a continental stitch, and then this one is probably only in existence in military uniforming, I would think. It's sort of more like costume work than it is anything real. But there we are. That's the four faux stitches that are applicable to working class stuff. So you can have fun with those and play with them. Again, I'm kind of sorry that this one turned out kind of garbage, but I don't ever do them. So I have to practice with them whenever I want to do them. In fact, even before I filmed it, you can see I have this little thing here where I just had to remind myself how the stitch even worked. So, you know, we all have to practice. When I put this on my own garment, I had to practice to get it's the loop, you know, the loop distancing. That's it takes a few times to figure out where it really wants to be, especially with the thread that you're using. But gives you something to play with, people, and you know, I hope you have some success with it. Now from here, we'll probably talk about welt buttonholes. That's sort of the last buttonhole that I'm aware of, really, that applies to working class stuff. And we see them in Anglo-American tailoring, usually on thicker materials, interestingly enough, like overcoats. And we see them quite a bit on the continent, again, in sort of everything. So, again, they're just more into cheating with buttonholes on the continent. So we'll discuss that stuff in the next video, welt buttonholes. And from that point on, I guess we'll be into the realm of nice and pretty buttonholes. So I look forward to seeing you all when we get there, and I appreciate you having been with me this far. So until then, be well and take care.